What's up, guys? I'm quite a bit much, and this is my Lego Brickfig of Kratos. I was in the mood to build some more Lego stuff recently, and I also wanted to return to YouTube in some fashion. So what I did was I looked to see what my most popular Lego videos are, and to my surprise, actually, my most popular video was that old Springtrap mock I made 3 or 4 years ago at this point. And I say surprised because as of right now, I am not very proud of that figure at all. I think that it was thrown together haphazardly, much like those those other figures of the similar style that I made, that Scorpion and that Marauder from Doom Eternal. However, it is my most popular video, so I decided that, like any good capitalist, I would profit off of that. So I went back to that old design philosophy of making things as simple as possible while still retaining the core elements and details of whatever character I was making. Which leads us to now with my Kratos mock. And I think this guy came together really, really well. If you watch those old videos, you could definitely see where certain proportions and different aspects of the build itself, the different parts connections, and how everything fits together is very much improved. You can see that I still kept that same sort of head design with two studs as the eyes. And I'm very proud of how this came together. Zooming in on the head here, you can see how I used this central bracket piece to create his beard. I tried a couple of different methods in order to get the head shape that I wanted, and this was the best I could figure out. Originally, I wanted to have a 2x2 slope piece instead of the two 1x2 slope pieces, but that piece just ended up being really bland, and it kind of just covered up too much the head for my liking. Of course, this solution, as you can see, it leaves a pretty noticeable gap in his face there, but from most angles it looks pretty okay. As you can see, his red stripe along his body, it's a little too big. It's a little too prominent. His tattoo is not supposed to be it's not supposed to take up this much of his head, but that's the best I could do with this scale. As you can see, I attached the head with a jumper plate to allow for some swivel mobility. The arms, the shoulders are pretty much non-existent. I couldn't really figure out how to make a dynamic shoulder that wasn't just a shoulder pad, which is what we have here. Because of this little hinge in the shoulder pad, he's able to move his arm really nicely. You can see that I used some more hinges in order to get this sort of strap detail over his chest like he has. I could have just used a regular plate, but I wanted to add a little more extra detail into the strap itself. You can see that his red kind of comes around a little too much again. The way it is shaped on his in-game model, it could not really be achieved with my building style at this scale. Turning him around, you can see that for his back, I went kind of simplistic with it. I just added some tarps and some rags just to give the sense of, his kind of back leather that he has in the Norse games. And I did include a stud jumper plate that will become relevant later. For the rest of the body, you can see that I changed up the hands specifically a lot. Instead of being just that toe ball joint and another another plate on top, I decided to actually add some prominent fingers. He has these hinge plates so that he can actually hold things, and it makes his fists look a lot more defined. You can see it looks like he actually has knuckles with these open studs. I tried covering those up, but they made the hands a little too big for what I was going for. He has his arm guards here. He's got some chains. Those are more prominent for his weapons, his blades of chaos. He has some skirt details here and a little bit of a loincloth. I know it's technically supposed to be a lot bigger. Just another thing I couldn't really figure out. Also, something that wasn't really that much important to me as just getting something that gets the idea across. His back loincloth is actually a little different. This little bar piece here is exposed for Mimir, which we will get to later. His boots are pretty simplistic. They're just regular brown with some black pants. One thing I want to point out with this model, I know a lot of people don't really like the toe ball joints that I've used because they tend to break up the color scheme of pretty much anything that isn't gray, which I can understand that, but I think for what I was going for here, these pieces provide the best not only articulation, but also really good stability. Despite his weight, these joints actually hold together really well, and they don't really get loose. And he can hold a variety of poses. He's got good articulation in his legs and hips specifically. And his feet, I included some studs on the bottom. These are good if you want to prop him up on base plates. So you don't have to rely on balance to keep him standing. The first of the accessories that I made was the Leviathan axe, and I think this looks great. You can see that I've added some light blue here to give some sort of ice effect. I felt that gray just kind of was, a little too flat, and I wanted some detail to differentiate this when Kratos is holding it, because if he didn't, it would just blend in with his body. I included these grill pieces simply because I didn't have any flat, just regular 1x2 brown plates at the ready. You could say that this is the little fork below the handle that Brock speaks of in God of War 4, if you want. Turning it around, you can see it's a little more exposed in how these pieces attach, but I think that's fine. You really are only going to look at it from this angle when posing Kratos with it. It has these two studs that you can just clip in on the toe ball joint there. And you can wrap his fingers around, and I think that looks really, really good. I know technically the axe is supposed to have a little bend in the, a little bend below the handle, but to do that I would either need to use a hinge plate or some other method that would just make it a little too much of a bend, I think. I tried a couple things, I tried a couple different plates. The hinge plates I don't have in brown, so I think this will, it suffices. It gets the point across, and I still think it looks pretty good. And of course, the axe can be stored on his back, like so. His other accessories I've made are the Blades of Chaos. These ones were actually pretty tricky for me to figure out. The way they're shaped in the game, it's kind of hard to replicate that at this scale and making it look good. So, as you can see, I used this bracket piece in order to figure out how to get the curve in the blade that I wanted, as well as get the ridges on the other side. And there's a snot piece here to give the blade that shape it has. I used orange for this one as it's, they're fire blades. And I also included these chain elements that, for when he's swinging them around. And these plug in pretty much the same way that the axe does, except you attach the rest of the chains to his arms the way they wrap around in the games. They can get stored on the back as well. The chains still remained attached to the arms as to not clutter them up on the back. This leaves way to add the axe back on. So he's got this whole arsenal of weaponry that you can store on his back. I also made one of Kratos' shields from the Norse games. This one is specifically the parry shield. I believe it's the one that he had in God of War 4. I'm not entirely sure. I don't exactly remember. As you can see, I used a lot of these curved dark tan elements in order to get that shape that it has when it unfolds off of his arm. Speaking of, it attaches pretty much the same way the chains do on this jumper plate. It's got this round 2x2 piece that you can just snap on there. The last weapon I made for Kratos was the Draupnir spear. This is actually not made of bricks, as you can see. I wanted to make it gold so that I could have an excuse to put this ring part on it, as well as the flag on the bar pieces. This, I don't think it's my favorite of the weapons. It could be better. I just don't have any brick gold pieces that would have worked for this scale. As you can see, it is pretty long compared to usual minifigure weapons. Of course, it doesn't actually peg into the hands. Instead, what you do is you use these stud pieces as a sort of grip for him to hold in one hand, as well as just wrapping the other around another end of the bar. And I think that weapon in hand, it looks a lot better. And of course, if you don't have another ring piece, you can just take the ring off of the Draupnir spear and just put it on his finger like he wears it in the games. The last accessory I made, which technically isn't an accessory, is Mimir's head. I used the same build for the beard, except I made this one a lot bigger because I didn't need to have his head swivel on anything because he has no body to swivel on. As you can see, I used these round pieces up here as his horns. He has yellow eyes to represent the Bifrost, and he has a little clip on the back of his head to represent the rope that he's wrapped around in. Of course, foreshadowing, we're going back to that little clip, bar piece, and he can just clip on like so, which looks a bit silly, but, that's how Kratos walks around in the games, so I think it's fair. And that just about does it for my Lego Brickfig Kratos. I decided to actually give these things a name now. They are called Brickfigs, as to, emphasize how they are pretty rudimentary brick-built action figures. Not like the ones that LEGO's making now. Those are way too big, and they have weird faces. Now that I've built this guy, I've actually gotten a core design skeleton that I really, really do like. So I am also making a new scorpion. I am going back to that old design and retooling it to make it more accurate, because that old model was just inaccurate in a lot of ways. That's one of the weird things I used to do in my old videos. I would make things from franchises I knew were popular that I had no knowledge of. Back when I did microfigs, I made a Kratos microfig without knowing anything about God of War, simply because I knew the character was popular. Now, of course, I've completed my arc, and I know why Kratos is one of the gaming titans that he is. But the same thing went for Scorpion when I made that old model. The only two that I actually knew anything about were the Springtrap and the Marauder that I made. Speaking of those old videos, please don't watch them. They're not very good. But when I made those 3 original Brickfigs before they got a name, I had actually started to work on way more than those 3 before scrapping those projects entirely. I was going to make a Sub-Zero to go with my Scorpion, only to find out that the color of blue that I wanted to use originally simply wasn't the same pieces as the ones I had used in that medium yellow, so I just couldn't finish him. I was also working on a Batman, a Spider-Man, and a Doomslayer. Of course, those may or may not see the light of day ever. I have developed my style a lot, I think. So this will not be the last big, brick fig that I build. I am working on Scorpion, as well as a Sub-Zero, and a Wolverine, which I'm excited to show. And then after that, I think it's high time that I do something Elden Ring with my Legos, because if I was still making microfigs, I guarantee they would have dominated all of the videos, because that has now become my favorite game of all time. But of course, that comes later. As for now, if you liked the video, like, subscribe, all that jazz, leave a comment if there's anyone you'd want to see me build next. And of course, I will see you in the next video. Goodbye!